It's full, so I want to go on the
There we
computer.
Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Faith, for the invitation to come along and have a conversation and share some ideas and some inspiration for how you might step into your next chapter. Before I get going, I wanted to share a couple of things that had come up this morning, just as I was getting ready, and then as Faith and I were first talking when I came into the room. One was that I was listening to a wonderful podcast by a woman called Martha Beck. Is anyone here familiar with Martha Beck's work? She's an American life coach and author who just writes brilliantly. I love reading her essays and other things. But this morning she was talking about the idea that when life calls us to stop, it's usually because something else is about to start. And if we look at our life in retrospect or backwardly, and we can see that there's things perhaps we felt we've had to give up for whatever reason. You know, it could be a health reason, it could be a family reason, a circumstantial reason, but we've had to give it up. But usually that is because there is something else waiting in the wings to come forward. And it was a lovely reminder this morning when I just paused for a moment, when I've gone through many of my own next chapters, and some of them have had some real sadness or even resentment attached to them. But when I've had the grace of the space between me and the event, I can actually see quite often, with the benefit of what I call hindsight, which is compassionate reflection, then I can see that it was absolutely as it was supposed to be. And so that concept of stopping and starting felt really good. Then the other thing that Faith and I were talking about this morning, you may be familiar with the idea of the stages that women go through, with the idea of that there's maiden, mother, crone as the 3 stages of life. But there's actually another one that's been introduced that you might not have heard about before. Basically, when that concept was brought in, our life expectancy was only about 55 to 60 max. But now we're living, as we know, well into, in most cases for women, well into our 80s. And so another stage has been inserted, so to speak, which is called the MAGA stage. Nothing to do with Donald Trump. So please take that out of your head. But so the maiden, the mother, the MAGA stages usually kicks in around menopause. And it means that we've got this space in which our personal power becomes really available to us, because those responsibilities that we're so used to are receding, and possibilities are actually coming into the foreground for us. So have a look when you're offline today, or when you're off the call, go and do a bit of Googling around the concept of the MAGA stage for women and have a read. It's quite empowering when you read it. So a lot of us may find ourselves in that stage before we then really claim the crone stage as well. But that was just some thoughts before we even open with the concepts today. So I am going to share my screen and some slides. And as we go through, very, very welcome to ask questions, to pop them into the chat, to raise your hand, whatever the case may be. Because these ideas, where are we going, slideshow? These ideas are really things for you to consider. I'm not expecting, although it does happen occasionally, that there is a revelation or two on the call where you'll suddenly go, oh my goodness, I've never thought of that. And suddenly a new idea will just leap into your mind. But a lot of these concepts that I'm going to be sharing with you today are food for thought, because many of us have new desires that are bubbling up anyhow, but how do we give them shape and form? Well, that to me is the essence of the next chapter. So if I can just make my slides behave. They do not want to. Here we go. Okay. So what we're going to look at today is what is actually a next chapter. How do I define that? And what's the actual cycle that I see us go through again and again and again? It's always nice to know what's coming so that we can be prepared for it. Ideas to help you explore about what might be next for you. Because in a lot of instances, we can get stuck and like, I don't know, I've got no idea, I just don't want this. That's a good place to start. Knowing what you don't want then helps you flip it into potentially what you do want. There's also a couple of stumbling blocks that could actually stop you from moving forward into a next chapter. And I've got some half a dozen good ideas on how to move through that. And importantly, the role of self-leadership in that transition. Self-leadership is an area that I'm very, very interested in when it comes to coaching and mentoring. And just I want to give you a quick overview of how that looks as well, because it could be useful. Just noticing there's some things happening in the chat, so just having a look. Hindsight, yeah, I love hindsight. I think I wrote about it in my book as well. It's just a point that hit me and I really liked the feel of it. Okay, so a little bit about me. Yes, I'm a coach and mentor, a facilitator. I also like speaking. I've written a book, which a few of you have got a copy of. On a bit of hiatus at the moment, but I do a lot of podcasting. And in fact, one of the extra bonuses that I'm putting out for you guys today is links to half a dozen quite inspiring next chapter podcast interviews that I've done about women who've changed it all up. Hearing other people's stories can be really useful. Yes, I'm a wife. I'm a mum of 4. I've got my own kids, Cameron, who's down here in Canberra now, and Charlotte, who still lives with us, and 2 bonus boys who I inherited when I married my husband. Self-employed for 20 years. And me, it's the combination of self-leadership and strategy, knowing who you are, and then deciding how you're going to go about things, which is what I really focus on. So what I'm interested in knowing right now, with this lovely photo that I nicked from your website, Faith, is where these 6 points are you at? Or maybe a different one, maybe more than one. So I'd love you to put into chat when I go through the 6 so you can identify how you see yourself at the moment. So are you undergoing a big life change at the moment and really making new choices about a different way of living? Perhaps your kids are now independent and you've realized, whoa, there's time for me. That's definitely the stage that I'm in at the moment. Perhaps you've got this feeling that I haven't reached my full potential. That's something I hear a lot from women, this sort of ache that's in the background. Maybe you're thinking about launching or even changing a business that really uses your strengths and your skills. Perhaps it's a new career direction or something else. So looking at those 6 there, is there a couple of those numbers that you would pop into the comments, just so I know where people are at? So if you can have a look at that and then pop it into the chat. I'll just pause for a sec while you do that. Or if there's something else, pop that in as well. Again, the idea of this is it helps me understand where you're at, but it also gives each other a feeling of, oh, you too, me too, or I hadn't thought of it like that. Let's see what we've got coming through. Dun, 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 dun. Annalise is 1 and 2. Susan looking to pivot. Oh, Shirley's doing something else. Well, if you want to define that for us in there, if you'd like to, Shirley, that would be great. Got a 3 and a 6. Major life change plus number 2. It's seldom just 1. 1 and 3. Yeah, it's seldom just 1. Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. Okay, well, let's see what we can do about that then. So it's important to think about, there are some major well-documented stages that we go through, apart from that maiden mother crone and Marga. In adult development theory, it talks about how we continue to develop throughout our lives. We don't get to a stage and stop. There's cognitive, emotional, physical changes that are happening all the time. So what often happens at this stage of life is we really start to reevaluate, well, what is life? What's it all about? You know, what really matters? And we can have this tendency to cut away the crap, excuse my French, and really get granular about the stuff that's most important to me. Because we start becoming really aware of our mortality, that we're not here forever. There's a great book called 400 Weeks, which is the average life expectancy. It's a really great book to get you focused on the things that matter. So that's written by a British journalist. That's one I'd recommend having a look at. We also get this shift from achievement to fulfillment. Stages in life where we had to do more and be more and get more and prove ourselves starts to fade away. And there is more of a focus on what's fulfilling. So from that external, do I have to prove myself to others, to that internal focus? What am I really here for? What would I like to do? There is this transcendence of ego. It's not all about me, which is interesting. It's this juxtaposition. It's about fulfillment, but that fulfillment often comes from how can I help others? Not in a way that women have always been there to care and have all the responsibilities, but it's like we begin to hone in on an area that feels really important to us. Causes really come up. The OWN network, I think it was, Faith, that was at the event a couple of weeks ago. The Older Women's Network is a great example of people drawn to focusing and assisting a particular cause. There's also a real desire to cut through the bullshit, the BS, and have that real authentic connection with people. That's incredibly important to us. And we start to reassess our own identity, like, who am I becoming? Because my roles are changing. So under these circumstances, the idea of success, like the definition of it for us as an individual, is very personal. But if you think about success overall now is about, cognitive, the way we think, the way we feel, how physically we're going, and how spiritually we're feeling. Positive psychology, which I've studied because I adore it, it's so interesting, tells us that to age well, we need engagement and flow. So we have to be engaged in activities that give us that real sense of purpose and fulfillment. We want to have life satisfaction, so goals that we set that are meaningful for us. That's that internal focus. Continued learning and growth, carrying on as a lifelong learner. So your personal growth and development is absolutely vital to keep us well as we age. And also cultivating optimism and positive thinking. This isn't about Pollyanna thinking, like, oh, I've lost my leg. No worries, I've got another one. Like, we're not talking about Pollyanna in that respect, but we are showing that when we can look for the positive, when we can lift ourselves, then we have better emotional resilience. It's that concept of a glass half full. We all know what it's like being around people who have a more positive and optimistic outlook. They lift and engage us as well. Okay, so those factors are really helpful for positive aging. So I want to just do a quick mindful moment, if I may, and see if you feel comfortable with this. It's going to open something. Dun, dun, dun. Thought I had it open. Aha, okay. So if you're comfortable, ladies, if you could just sit back, get comfortable. This will take about a minute, and just close your eyes for a moment. And just take put your hands in your lap is always a nice place. Just take any pressure off you and just breathe. Just take a long, deep breath in and hold it for a couple of seconds, and then a long, full breath out. And then one more big, full breath in. Fill up your lungs right from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. And breathe out again. Now consider, how do you define success for you in your head? So what comes to mind when you think of success for you? Let's breathe in and think about that. Now I'd like you to shift your hand or hands to your heart. And breathe in again. Breathe in deeply. Full deep breath and hold it. And breathe out. One more deep breath. And breathe out. Now, how do you define success in your heart? What bubbles up for you there? Just be aware of it. What does success mean to you in your heart? Then keep on breathing. And now I'd like you to shift your hands to your belly, down on your tummy. Big breath in. And hold it. And then full breath out. And as you breathe in again, how do you define success in your gut? Breathing as you consider that and see what comes to the surface. How do you define success in your gut? And then breathe in and out. And when you feel comfortable, open your eyes. Okay. It's something that's really interesting to see if there is a difference. And I see this often in my clients when we do this in a face-to-face workshop. When they shift from head to heart to gut, their definition of success changes. There was a woman I was working with the other day where in the head, the success was busy. That was the first word that came to her. But interestingly enough, when she got to the gut, the feeling of success was peace. Two things that are very, very different from one another. And one of the things that she needed to do was to cut away a lot of the stuff that was getting in the way of her really doing the thing that she wanted to do. So it's just And interesting, and you can journal on that as well. It doesn't just have to be, a meditation or a mindfulness moment, but it's really interesting to see what's the contrast when you allow yourself to consider the difference between what your head, your heart, and your gut say to you. Okay. So what is a next chapter? Well, this is the model that I created because I'd seen it in so many clients, and I'm a big fan of having a visual model. I think it really helps. So it's the thing that is calling you forward. It's the next stage. Now, some of these chapters are really short. It might be just a season of soccer, for example, when you decide to try a new sport. But sometimes others can feel like a whole book in and of themselves. They can be really quite full and intense and deep and broad. And you probably go through this change cycle lots of times, and there's more chapters to come because we are works in progress all the time. So it always starts with discontent, and we're going to unpack this feeling of not happy, Jan, to use that expression, or something's just not quite right. Then it's about working out, well, what do I want? And that's what I call the deliberation zone, because we go, not happy, what do I want? Don't know, but I'm not happy, but what do I want? I don't know. And you go round and round in that deliberation zone until you make a decision to step through, make the choice, and then design what your next chapter is going to look like and actually go out and do it. That's the delivering stage. So that's the difference between the deliberation zone and the doing zone. And I find that when we're a bit younger, when we still had many more complications, shall we say, of life, and we weren't so centered in our own lives, we spent a lot of time in the deliberation zone because we would quite often dismiss the things that were calling us. Sometimes through necessity, sometimes through doubt, and many other reasons. But that's the cycle that we'll be moving through. And I love this quote from Eleanor Roosevelt. This is why we keep looking for next chapters, because the purpose of life is to live it, to taste it, to experience it to the utmost, and to reach out eagerly without fear for a newer and richer experience. Now, the only thing that I would disagree in that quote is the fact that, fear is a natural part of things. Okay, fear is normal. I don't want to meet a fearless person because I think they'd be a bit crazy. Being a person who understands that something new does bring with it doubt and fear is fine. It's the ability to be able to look at the fear, put it to one side, and keep moving forward. Because there's, that definition of fear is false evidence appearing real. I don't know if you've heard that definition before, but it made sense to me. So that's the only thing I'd change about Miss Eleanor's perspective. Okay. So this first stage of discontent is when you've got this call to something new. And this is how to handle it or how to look at it. You've got to give yourself permission. Okay. Because one of the things that we're very good at doing as women is pushing stuff aside and soldiering on. But you should not do that when you're feeling discontent. Really important for you to look closely at it. So ask yourself these sort of questions. Where do you feel you're not contributing in the way you'd like to? Where are you feeling frustrated? What's no longer fulfilling? Be honest. Okay, you don't have to show this list to anybody. You can just be looking for yourself for now. And what do you just no longer want to do? There's things that, like, I am sick of cooking dinner 6 nights a week, right? It's not happening. It's 2 nights. That's it. Everyone else can take care of themselves on the other nights. That's one example. Now, is the origin of your discontent internal? Okay, as in you're working it out and you're deciding, or is it external, as in you're looking around at other people and thinking, oh, well, I don't want to be like this or do that. Be careful that you look at and connect to the internal discontent. Okay, that's really important. What is happening for you as opposed to what you think should be happening for you. We want to shrug off the shoulds, which is the last point here. Does it come from the energy of I should be doing this, or I would like to do this, or I shouldn't be doing this, or I don't want to do this? So really checking in internally. There's no other way really of exploring the discontent apart from honesty. And sometimes you can work with a therapist as well. I've certainly done my fair share of work in the therapy rooms to assist me in really working out, because we can be very stuck behind conditioned thinking from a lifetime of the way that women are conditioned. And so sometimes therapy can be really helpful. But the key thing is reflection. Okay, journaling works a lot for me, talking with friends, etc. I've put up a page of resources that I'll give you the details towards the end. And in there is a brilliant set of reflection questions that I came across, which I use quite often when I'm journaling. And so there's a copy of those in there for you, which helps you really look at things like this. Okay, so if you're recognizing that there is discontent and you've been having a look at what could be causing it, the next step in the change cycle is to shape your desire. And this is where curiosity is your superpower. Okay, and there is several things that you can look at that help you give shape and form to your desire. Because probably 50% of the time, I've had women talk to me about, I don't know what it is that I want. I just don't know. And that is often because, without getting on my feminist soapbox, we've often put our own desires behind the desires of those that we're responsible for and to. And so we're out of practice. That's all it is. We're out of practice quite often at exercising this muscle. So here's some ways in which we will do it. We'll use your values, your strengths, your soapbox moments, your pits, way showers, preferences, and people. Okay, so there's lots and lots of tools that we have to utilize to work out the shape of our desires. So let's have a look at them. So your values. Now, our values are fairly consistent throughout our life, but the order of them is not consistent. As in, for example, family may have been an absolute top priority through a certain stage of life. But now that we're at a different stage of life, it doesn't go away. We don't just suddenly kick the family to the curb and tell them, that's it, it's all over, Red Rover. No, what happens is that they go down the totem pole a little bit and something else rises above it. So this is what I mean by looking at the reordering of your values. What's come to the fore? What's asking for more attention? And the other question to ask yourself is, are they in action? So, for example, if creativity, as we're seeing here on the screen, you discover is a high value of yours, but when you look at your life, creativity is not evident in it. You're not doing anything or allowing yourself the space to do anything to exercise that creativity, that can lead to discontent. So again, in the resources which I'm providing, there's a great link to this cool little website I found where you do a values reorganization and test online. It's quite visual, it's really easy to do, and it brings out what you are perceiving as your top 5 values right now. There's many, many other ways of doing values work, but this is just a great way of getting it started if you haven't done it for a while. And it's quite often easy for us to talk about top line values, like, oh, well, honesty and integrity are really important. Yes, but what else? What else is important to you? You can dig a little deeper. But those are the 2 questions to be asking yourselves. Have they reordered themselves? And are they in action in my life? Because sometimes the next chapter can be as simple as taking an art class because there's no creativity there. For me, I've just discovered adult coloring in. And I actually almost apologize for it because it didn't seem that creative, but I've let go of that. I love it. I have so many pens, so many coloring in books, so much music and podcasts to listen to while I do it. So that's just one example of how I brought more creativity back into my world. Your strengths. Okay. People who use their strengths regularly have higher well-being. It is an absolute research documented fact. So if you were doing the things that come easily to you and give you a feeling of being energized, you're going to be a happier little Vegemite. But it's also a case of the strengths that you have. How can they be utilized in the world? Perhaps you are someone who has really strong articulation skills and a high passion. And so you decide to align yourself with a cause and find yourself rallying people at an event. That's one such example. But there are so many strengths, and it can be really hard for us to spot our own. It's hard to see the spot that you're standing on. So I do strengths profiling, which you're very welcome to engage me for, but there are also some great tests online where you can do your own strengths. The one to write down is VIA. Do you look for the VIA strengths? Then there is a free quiz there, which takes you through your character strengths and gives the definition for them. And it's the guy, Marty Seligman, who is almost the founder of positive psychology. He and another fellow put that together. So it's very well researched, really evidence-based, and really interesting. So find out, are you using your strengths? Are there opportunities to shape your desires where your strengths can be used more often? Because you will simply feel better when you do that. So having a look at your strengths is another way to shape those desires. Your soapbox moments. This is a biggie. So if I gave you a soapbox to stand in the middle of Times Square, what would you get up there and talk about? What is it that outrages you or activates you or energizes you, enlivens you? What are the subjects that really get you going? Because they are also indicators of where your next chapter might be. So when we were at the events with Faith, one example was when Jane Caro was speaking. I went and downloaded her Accidental Feminist book and listened to it whilst adult colouring in the next day, and felt myself getting really like all het up about the ways in which women in their 50s are that fastest growing homeless group. And I was aware of that, but it was then listening to both Jane talking about it and also remembering the OWN network, the older women's network that Faith has Silver Sirens associated with. And I went, boom, there's a soapbox moment for me. Where is there an opportunity here for me to contribute more? Remember, that sense of contribution and fulfillment is what is going to help us age better in every way, as well as feel more as though we're making a difference. So be aware, what is it that like sets your hackles up? Okay. Can you do something with that? So really important to look for those soapbox moments. Another one is your pits. Not quite as lovely, but incredibly valuable. So what have you faced and overcome? There's a woman I interviewed on my podcast quite some time ago who introduced to me for the first time the idea of post-traumatic growth. It blew my mind. It was obvious. I sort of knew this, but I didn't have a word, like an expression for it. So that is the growth that going through some sort of trauma or dilemma causes in you. Personally, for me, part of mine is sobriety. Now, I've been in the recovery movement now for next month, it'll be 17 years. And the growth that came as a result of working through that has been enormous. I wouldn't change it for the world. And it allows me to share with other people in terms of way in which I can grow and develop and the wisdom that I have to share as a result. So what is it that you've faced? And it doesn't have to be big T trauma. As you may have heard the expression, there's big T and little t trauma. So little t trauma can just be, figuring out how to do something that was really difficult for you, but it hasn't changed your entire world, but it's just given you some deeper insight. From a business perspective, it can be really simple stuff. Like I have worked out how to use Instagram in a really easy way because it was driving me crazy and was incredibly confusing. And so you've worked out how you can then share that wisdom with others. So it doesn't always have to come from a terrible experience. It can just be a challenging experience. But don't shy away from these because there is so much that we can learn from other people who have faced adversity. They have a lot of wisdom to share. And you could very much be one of those people. We don't get to this age without having gone through a bit of stuff. And hearing other people's stories can just open the door to a new possibility for us. So I think that sharing is incredibly important from those pits. And let's go on the bright side here. What delights you? When have you felt most joyful and alive and in flow? That reflection journaling can help you find it. Do more of that. It might be that I have a friend and colleague down in Manly she is in the art world, and she now teaches life art, life drawing classes where there's someone who is doing a nude portrait and there's all these people learning how to do that alongside her, and she loves it. That's when she is most joyful and alive and in flow, teaching others how to tap into their own artistic potential. There's many, many different ways. A client last week, what did she say? Surf skis, that was it. She really wants to teach other women in their 50s how to go on surf skis because apparently they're quite tricky because when you fall out, it's tricky to get back in and there's some fear, etc. there. And a lot of people who teach it are sort of big buffy men. So that's what she wants to do because she loves it. Okay? And there is a market for that as well. So that's what delights her, and that's where her next chapter is going to come from. So look at what delights you. When have you felt really joyful and alive and in flow? Because that could help shape that next chapter for you as well. And this one I think is particularly important. This is the concept. This is not showers. This is showers, just to get the pronunciation right here. So a way shower is somebody who you notice and go, wow. Okay, so who do you admire and why do you admire them? So there was, who have we got that's got the beautiful bookcase in the background? Jody. So Jody, if you went up there and you know, pulled out some books that you absolutely have loved and have inspired you. So that author is a way shower. So it's somebody that really makes you go, wow, this is a person who's making a difference. This is a person I find really that I really admire. So what are they doing? Whether they be an author, someone who started a movement, you know, somebody that you met at the tuck shop, doesn't matter. But when you have that feeling of like admiration for somebody, that can be a positive trigger, because it's like, what is it about them? What is it that they are doing? That can be a hint to you that maybe that's an area for you to explore. So an example for me is Brené Brown. I first saw her speak, oh my goodness, about 8 years ago in Chatswood. She was speaking there. I remember finding her first book, which a lot of people don't know. Her first book was, I Thought It Was Just Me, But It Isn't. It's not her most famous of books, but it was brilliant. And I remember sitting reading it and just having those moments of like, oh, felt so seen, so heard, so understood. It was incredible. So I went off and saw her speak and was like, this woman is just the bee's knees. And this whole concept of helping people own their worth, that has been a central thread that has run through everything I do ever since. At the end of the day, I mean, I may be a self-leadership coach and a business strategist, but underneath it all, it is about self-belief. Because if you believe you can, then you can. That's it at the end of the day. My expression is borrow my belief in you until you have it for yourself. And that came directly from watching Brené Brown and being inspired by her and the sort of work that she was doing in the world. So who is it that makes you stop and take a breath? Who is it that has your mouth hanging slightly open and going, wow? Because you can't recognize those sort of traits in somebody unless they're in yourself. You would not recognize them. So pause there and really think about, who are my way showers? Because that can definitely give you some darn good fodder for where you might be going next. Okay. Your preferences. This is a simple one. Okay. What books, again, coming back to Jody, what workshops and podcasts and topics are most interesting for you? Really key one here is, if I put you into a bookshop, where do you go? You know, which are the shelves that you go to most often? Because that's a really good indication of where your interests are. And if you delve beneath the surface a little bit, I have a friend I was talking to in Melbourne yesterday who retrained as a life coach, and she turned 50 last year. Yeah, and she's just retrained as a life coach now through the Beautiful You Academy that's down in Melbourne, because she kept going back to the same spot time and time again. So it was like, okay, what are you going to do with that? My husband had been talking about learning to sail for so many years. And then finally, it was a while ago now, it was about 18 years ago. He's 68, so he was 50 when he first learned to sail. Okay, and just had been thinking about it. I think he read Swallows and Amazons as a boy in England, and had stayed with him ever since, this concept of sailing. And now he runs, never would have thought this at the time, he runs a marine business importing Beneteau yachts from France, and has like offices in 3 different spots, and just came back from Cannes where they had a boat show. Like, he never could have imagined when he took that first sailing lesson at 50 where that was going to lead him. Okay, so what is it that's calling you? What have you got a preference for? And the second piece is, what new ideas can you explore? So this again is watching your own curiosity. So flicking through the paper or online, if something grabs your attention, go and check it out. I went to, what did I go to? Modern Jive dance lessons 2 weeks ago. I've only been twice. I was absolutely hopeless, but it was so joyful. I've never tried that in my entire life, but I saw an ad on Facebook and noticed that I had been watching in my Instagram reels. If I was spending some time on Instagram having a bit of fun, I always paused and watched the dances every single time, which of course then I got fed more of them because of the algorithm. And then I got an ad. So off I went, and I actually took a couple of classes, and I'll be going back. So open yourself to those possibilities. What is it that makes you curious? I'm just checking the chat because there's a few things there. Faith is your way show. Absolutely. Michelle Obama. Oh, and I'm glad, Sarah, I just saw that what you said about the head, the heart, the gut. Fantastic. Women scientists, yes. Oh, Lessons in Chemistry. Has anyone read that book? It's about to come out as a show. Write it down. Whoever said woman scientist, Lessons in Chemistry is amazing. It's a novel. So good. So good. Okay, so that's the idea, is what are you interested in and what sparks your curiosity? Please go and examine it, because it can be one of those breadcrumbs that leads you towards something new for your next chapter. And then your people. Okay, who do you most want to spend time with? This is a really strong indicator of who your people are, and therefore who lifts and inspires you and who you want to lift and inspire. Yeah, this is not just the people you like to hang out with, but if we come back to that soapbox, just as an example here, you might be outraged about, a particular topic. And this might sound a little bit dicey to talk about, but I was reading an article in the Herald yesterday where a woman wrote an opinion piece about how we have to protect our young people from online porn, about how the kids are accessing it so young, like at 11 and 12 years old, and the impact that's having on their whole vision of what relationships and sex looks like. And that was a real soapbox for me. But then who do I want to lift and inspire? That's kids, young teenagers. So you see, it's not necessarily the people that you want to spend time with in terms of going for coffee, but it's who you want to help or have some sort of impact on. And those two clash together big time for me. I want to do something, don't know what, but maybe there's something that I can help with there. Because when something grabs you and you feel a real pull, then you need to have a look at it. That doesn't mean that you have to solve the entire problem. You might just chip away at a little piece of it. Okay, so that's just something to consider when you're thinking about your people. Is there a part of the world that you want to impact and assist in some way? Just checking the chat. Susan saying, I'm loving having Aussie mentors. I've spent so many early mornings listening to USA. Okay, absolutely. I've done the same. And the cost of the Australian dollar. I've actually just enrolled in a new program about adult development, which was a fabulous woman in Queensland that I discovered. It was very nice to be paying Australian dollars instead of American dollars. So I very much agree. Okay, so what we're looking for here is the connecting threads. That's what you're looking for with all those ideas. And hopefully you got a copy of your mosaic, which is to pop these down on, to start looking at your big picture. A copy of this is in the resources that you'll be able to access, but you can see all the pieces that you pop here, and it starts to give you like the big picture of you that you can start to make some choices about. Okay. So this is when you're going to move from desire now into decision. So we want you to leave the deliberation zone. And this is not necessarily something that happens in an afternoon. It might take you a little while, but we want to move now into the doing zone where you actually design the thing you're going to do. But this is often when we can hit a wall, okay? Because that's when your inner critic arrives. And it's that voice inside. And social conditioning, what we are supposed to do or not to do, inflexible thinking, because we've been thinking in the same patterns for quite a while, and doubts start to make things difficult. And that can really take you off on detours, it can derail your ideas, and it can even just give you total inertia. Too hard, I'll move on. So you can see this, I've seen this happen where the actual change cycle is then surrounded and overcome by these doubts and difficulties. Okay, there's a lot of work to do here, but I just want to give you some quick ideas of what you can do in terms of solution. Now, the first one is making sure you've got at least one belief buddy. Okay, a belief buddy is someone who holds your dreams just as tightly as you do, and you do the same for them. So I'm lucky I've got about 3 or 4 of these. My girlfriend rang the other day. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me that this thing, that it's possible that I really can do it. You're not crazy. I know you can do this, yada, yada, yada. So it's your cheer squad. You need to have at least one belief buddy, and you do the same for them as well. Community. We've got silver sirens. You're already got this one ticked. Okay, community is about where people see you and they hear you and they understand you, which is what we all need. And as I was saying before, it's the stories. When we hear other people's stories, it opens like this chamber of secrets in our own brain, that if it's possible for her, then maybe it's possible for me as well. Incredibly important to have community. Evidence. I ask everyone to create a fabulous file. Okay, very quickly, a fabulous file is evidence of your fabulosity. So you go and grab all examples of feedback, of cards, of photos of things you've done, awards you've won, things you've gone to. In my fabulous file is photographs from the first trip I ever took alone overseas at the grand old age of 47. It took me a while. So feedback from clients, got a lot of stuff in there, personal goals, etc. So when my personal inner critic is telling me that I suck and nothing I'm wanting to do is ever going to happen, I go and roll around in my fabulous file for a while and remind myself that I've done a lot of good things and there's more to come. Really, really encourage that. Self-compassion. I cannot remember who used this expression, but I love it. How very human of me. If I screw up, if I make a mistake, how very human of me, because that's exactly who we are. So it is incredibly important. You spend more time in your head than anyone ever will. You need to be a safe harbor for yourself. One of the biggest contrasts I see in my ability of self-leadership before and after moving into sobriety, just for example, my inner critic, my way of speaking to myself was hideous. I used to rip myself apart. I do not do that any longer. Self-compassion is a central part of my world. And as a result, I try many more things than I ever used to, because I know that I will not beat myself up if it doesn't go well. Because how very human of me when I trip over my 2 left feet at dance class, and it's okay. Self-talk. Okay, so that self-compassion is closely linked to this. Now, what I mean by catch and detach is, for example, I lost my glasses this morning. I could not find them. And my first default was stupid, stupid, stupid. Why don't you ever up? Whoa, catch, detach. How very human of me. They'll be around somewhere. You've got a lot on your mind this morning. It's not surprising that you put them down accidentally. I also was diagnosed with ADHD 12 months ago, and I am medicated. That's changed my life. That's another chapter. But that makes me a little bit more self-compassionate about the fact that I don't keep track of things very well. So replacing it with different language. So please be very, very mindful of the way you speak to yourself. It's incredibly important. Not a new concept, but an incredibly important one. And have a vision of your future self for inspiration. Who are you becoming? Because we are always becoming. Imagining yourself, visualizing yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, and always connecting yourself back to that. Now, a few of those, if you can practice them, they will help when the doubts set in. Because of course the doubts are going to set in. How very human of you. Okay. So what do you do next? You experiment. Okay, because the actions of confidence come first and then the feelings. A lot of us wait until we feel confident. Well, you're going to be waiting a long time. That bus never comes. We just give it a go, because when you take action, you'll find that the fear dissipates. They can't live in the same space. So take action. Feel the fear and do it anyway, as that classic 70s book said. Then get out there and design it. Design in this respect. When I first did the change cycle, it was very much talking about business, designing your business model, designing your services, designing But it can be used not for a business. It can be used to design any sort of experiment that you want to try in your next chapter. And then get on and Dan will do it. Okay, you're out of the deliberation zone and you're into the doing zone, because then you will get feedback and you can course correct. Okay, but it's only, imagine if you're sitting in your car, just imagine this, and the car is switched off, your hands are on the steering wheel, and you're trying to change direction. How easy it is to turn, how easy is it to turn the wheel when the car is not moving? The answer is it's impossible. You'll break your arms. Okay, you have to be in motion to be able to course correct. So until you try it, you're not going to be able to make it better or make it work. You have to be in motion. So please do some experimentation. Okay. Now, as we're coming towards the end, I'm just mindful of time. Ooh, doing okay here. So what is self-leadership and how will it help? Now, this is another many masterclasses. And in the resources, you have access to the recordings of the masterclasses I have been running, so you can watch those when you want to. But I just want to give you a bit of a taste of why I use this framework. Okay, so this is how I like to really define it for us. So it's a conscious act. Draw a line in the sand of taking control of your life journey now, your decisions and your growth, especially during a transition. Okay, so it's not unconscious. It is very conscious. Okay, things they are changing. Okay, so it's about embracing your wisdom, because we have a lot of wisdom at this stage, your experiences, your values, your strengths, the things we've been talking about, but using them very deliberately to shape this next chapter. Okay, so at this stage of life, I think it's even more important, because it really helps us draw onto our resilience. Because again, to get to here, we have one heck of a mountain of resilience. So this is about defining the next path, not passively drifting into it and then waking up and going, oh. Especially there was another book, Bronnie Ware, Top Regrets of the Dying. She was a palliative care nurse. You may or may not have heard about this book, but she's had a lot of deathbed conversations with people. And the top regret was, I wish I'd lived my life the way I wanted to, instead of being so influenced by everybody else. That was, there's 4 others, but that was number 1. And that is what I call passive drift. It's just sort of drifting along. You'll hear about that in one of the self-leadership masterclasses if you watch it. So self-leadership is the exact opposite of passive drifting. It's about waking up, taking the reins and stepping forward. So there is a framework, because I do like visual models, can't help myself. Looks like this. The first step is self-knowledge, which is those strengths and values. I also use the Enneagram, which I love, which is it's a personality profile thing, gives you some great insights. It's from a psychology background, but it's about setting the right goals for you, not just setting goals. It's the right goals for you. There is a huge difference between setting goals and setting the ones that are actually right for you now at this stage of life. It's also about flexible thinking. So that's about noticing and flexibly responding to your internal thoughts and your dialogue. In the resources, you'll see that I've given you a list of common beliefs, limiting beliefs, positive and negative ones, because we can constrict our possibilities by patterns of thinking that we're stuck in, and we can't see them because we're standing on them. So being able to work on becoming more flexible in your thinking will make you far more of a self leader. Okay, emotional intelligence, that's a biggie. So that's about using, the way that I like to use it is using your emotions as like navigational tools. And I like to think of people as icebergs, not because they're cold, but because you see the behavior above the line, but there's all these emotions that are driving that behavior below the line. And having emotional dexterity, where instead, are you angry or are you incensed or irritated or annoyed? Or like there's many, many different versions of anger, just as one example, just as there's many, many different versions of happy. Are you amused? Are you ecstatic? Are you joyful? So really understanding those emotions gives you a better handle on the world, because someone who is incensed as opposed to irritated needs to take different actions, very different responses. So understanding what's under your own waterline definitely helps you not only navigate yourself, but be able to navigate other people as well. It's about intentional action. Remember, I was talking about that passive drifting. So intentional action is about consistent action to make positive change, but it is very tied to those goals. You're not just getting up and doing something. There is a purpose behind it. And the last piece is vitality, which is about prioritizing your well-being. So you've got the energy. I didn't actually have that in the model until my own experience last year. I took a sabbatical. I was really fortunate to be able to do that because of things that have been happening with some family demands and some mental health challenges. I was cactus, so exhausted after a very long, almost 3 years, and I had no vitality. I worked with a naturopath, and I suddenly realized that makes sense, or maybe I'm a slow learner, but I had no ability to actually take action because I was utterly physically and emotionally exhausted. So I realized that it doesn't matter how good you are with the other areas. If you don't have the vitality, nothing's going to change anyway. So yes, we need to take good care of ourselves. And that recipe looks different for everybody. So that is the overall concept of self-leadership. And there's very specific tools that you use within it. So really, the message that I want to give you is that you can. Yeah, maybe it's taking the course or sending the letter or leaving the job or starting the blog or making the speech or joining the cause or starting the business or booking the trip or building the app, having the conversation. I don't know what it is for you. You know, you need to shape that desire, but you can do it. There is so much evidence of so many of us who have turned over a page. And if you look back in your life, use that hindsight, you can see how many chapters you have begun. and closed and opened a new one. And now, at this stage of our lives, with all of that wisdom and power and experience we have, the sky's the limit. I absolutely believe that we are at the most powerful stage of our life. I love being in my 50s. Can't wait for what's coming next. So maybe it's time to set yourself free. I love this quote. What if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? What if you fly? So the resources that I have for you, you'll have endless downloads of this because you'll be doing lots of them, sharing them with a friend, those reflection questions that I mentioned, the link to the values quiz, but I'm also going to put the strengths one in there because I forgot about that one. So I'm going to add that one in. There's the limiting beliefs guide. So lots of things for you to have a look at and see which ones are true for you. There's half a dozen episodes of the podcast I've linked to. There's the self-leadership session recordings and another one coming soon. It happens on Friday. If you decide you'd like to do a proper strengths profile, then there's a $50 voucher to reduce the price for you. And of course, you can give me a call. There's a booking link if you want to have a conversation about support through developing a next chapter. And there is one other thing that I've thought of, which I'm going to add to the page as well. When I was talking about the emotional side of things, the emotional navigation, there's a brilliant little app that we were exposed to when I was studying positive psychology called the Mood Meter, as in MOOD. It's the coolest little thing. You go to it a few times a day, you identify the emotion that you're feeling, and it gives you the emotions all around it. So if you go happy, it gives you all these other words as well that might be a better fit. It helps you decide between high energy positive, low energy positive, high energy negative, low energy negative. And importantly, it asks you, what are you doing right now? And so at any one point in time, it doesn't tell you a lot, but over a period of time, 2 or 3 weeks, patterns emerge. And it helps you identify, oh, when am I? What am I doing when I am happy? What is happening when I'm not so happy? And I really expected to find that over the period, high energy positive would be my most common takeout because I'm one of those ridiculously extroverted people. But it was actually low energy positive. Contentment came up for me more than anything in this particular period. And that was lovely. I really liked that. So it's a very, very interesting app to use. So I will put a little link into your resource page as well. So where this is, you just go to angelaraspass.com.au/ of course, Silver Sirens. And then when you register there, you'll be able to go in and grab all of those things. And that really is exactly what I wanted to share with you today. I'll just stop sharing the screen and see if there's any questions, any comments, any feelings about what we've learned today.